We're gonna try to do this one more time. Uh, there was an earlier stream with the same title. Ended up short circuiting. Screen went black, and there was a little purple thing at the top. It's really weird. I've never had that happen during a stream before, but it is what it is. So, in so many words, I stated that you cannot blame someone for someone else's decision. And I guess I'll try to reiterate what was stated in the initial one. Um, I've had people who have made, oh, and I will envoy, people who have taken it upon themselves to examine, my relationships, interactions with others. This includes those that are online, those that are in person, so on and so forth. And I was telling the story about how back in 2015 there was a woman that I had, I liked. She'd given me the time of day, and I think she'd really distinguished herself among many of her contemporaries for seeming to be down to earth, not really being into many of the same pitfalls that I disliked. And so, I got attracted to her. And, after being turned down by her and her basically saying, leave me alone, she came back later that same day and stated that she believed the reason why my romantic pursuits, for lack of a better word, went left was because I didn't have self-love, and by having this, the rest would follow. This is her little manifesto in the text messages. But I never directly confronted her about saying that, even though we spoke for a short time afterward. But the reason it stuck with me out of just everything she said, which draws a mind blank, is because of how impractical it seemed and how it feels like it was almost foreshadowing of what a lot of the comments made by others nowadays are. Oh, you're the problem for why this didn't happen. It's all you. It's your fault. If this person, you know, um, didn't give you the time of day, even though you gave it to them, uh, it's not their fault for anything that they did. It's always you, just fully you. Forget 50-50, even though it's two people. It's 100% you. You should have turned into Professor X and use your mind control powers to make them want to talk to you and date you and do all this other crap. They won't go that extreme, but they basically imply that with the way they perceive people and the way they talk about you. Case in point, I had a person who several months back tried to allege that I was friendless, and it was really funny because for as much difficulty as I've had with romantic endeavors, platonic things have, for lack of a better term, been a walk in the park. I've since second grade consistently had a person with whom I can speak with and interact with, and actually, technically first grade, but the person who fulfilled that role at that time lasted all the way up until I was about maybe ninth or 10th grade. Bottom line is that these people who I just interact with and socialize and don't make any romantic passes at have stuck around in many instances. Envoy says this might be a maturity issue. People are kind of crazy during that time. Well, my problem is that I've seen people do it before. Like, I don't, this is the thing. Whenever, if you complained, as I did I had a conversation with a woman last year on this website. She spoke by text, I spoke by voice. It was very disjointed because you can just talk through a call, but whatever. She was saying that I allowed, in complaining about relationships, my high school experience to determine everything, and kept professing that supposedly people were going to mature. And I'm not saying that you don't have mature people of all ages, but to suggest basically the same narrative that Envoy suggested was the same one that she positioned, but it's being used for different time periods of life. Um, when do these people grow up when they're 30 or 40? When they've reached middle age? And I when we were talking about negativity and how it factors into how others perceive us, and all of that. It's true. Um, and there are things, I can openly admit not necessarily being in favor of when it comes to myself, but I can still understand it. For example, I don't necessarily like being reduced to a small group of people I talk with, but I understand why I do it, which is that the people who I choose to let into that group have proven themselves to have staying power, to actually want to speak with me, to reciprocate my interactions. Um, and it's so strange that whenever you talk with these people and you see that genuine desire to just go back and forth and have a dialogue and enjoy the other person's presence, you oftentimes ask yourself, why can't this be the case with those who, are of the opposite sex, those who you want to like you in a different way than, is platonic. All, just it goes to your mind and it starts getting to a point where as people continue to defile you and say, you're the reason for this, you're the reason for that, you're so caught up in knowing that it can work because you've seen it work in platonic interactions that you just don't buy it anymore. Envoy says, with how people act nowadays, a social interaction class should be mandated in high school. Yeah, and it's sad because a lot of the people that I see interacting with each other, because I vividly remember, how interactions used to be in school. People from the time they're 7 to 17 or uh, laughing at someone for liking one of their classmates. They're spreading rumors about that person across the campus. It just that's something that I didn't see change during my time in school. As students got older and older, it seemed like all that really developed about them was if they're male, how tall they are, and if they're female, how large their assets are. Just there was no growth in the classical sense of wanting to empathize and or understand with people, and the fact that no one is going to sit there and be entirely like you, or in some cases even like you at all. Yeah, but it's an extremely shallow world where the kids are conditioned from the time they're little to be douchebags, um, which is still more tolerable to me than when they're adults, and then keep up that same behavior when they're 17, 18, 19. Um, as a result of the parents not reprimanding them and saying, hey, golden rule. It's funny that you have all these religious people and they're the first ones to no, we're in something else that we don't need to get into. I was just going to talk about the a common thing I've seen where people will put "thank God" on their page, and then they're the first ones talking about they want to beat somebody's behind and doing all kind of unholy things. You're not deemed popular because you're necessarily are popular. You're popular. You can fight and are thugs. It's sad. Yeah, and what's disturbing is that a lot of times when we get into this thing of just trying to be like someone else, the role models of what people want are not ideal. So for example, a lot of males probably wouldn't, um, you know, go and act like thugs, for lack of a better term, if they weren't convinced that behavior will get them female attention, which it in some cases it has. Not saying every single one of them likes that, but when you see a style of behaving that is wrong, not being condemned as such, and actually rewarded with sexual relations and just interaction by others, it's it becomes hard to convince yourself, hey, this is the wrong way to be, even if the law says it is, even if everything you've known and read says the same thing. Um, and it's really sad that we have this thing where now, as I talk about why these interactions with between other people are bad, you have a lot that will just write off as, oh, he's jealous, he's so dispossessed, he wants everybody else to feel miserable. Um, but like I said before, with some of the guys I talk with, they have the same trouble, and I wouldn't be upset that they were with someone. So this idea of just being jealous as opposed to actually condemning a behavior that is problematic is baloney. But yeah, the main point of all of this the stream was just me talking about how much I hated others trying to condemn you for yeah someone else's choice. You know, in the romance thing, if you go out and talk with 50 or 60 women, um, and some of them give you the runaround, some of them don't respond back, you get blamed for all of that. I told you the story of how I had a woman I approached in this mall, walking by herself. I get her number. We have a little decent conversation before I get the number, of course, but whatever. And then I contact her on her on the on with this number. I don't hear back from her for about 2 or 3 weeks, and all she can say is, "I'm too busy to talk with you." Now, the reason that scenario keeps getting brought up is because it literally is one of those where I can't understand what exactly I could have done any differently. Should I have just sat at the mall and waited for her to come back and then tied her up and put her in my car and drive back to my place? Or in the other instance where you have I'm gonna give you another romantic example. You have the woman who I mentioned earlier 3 years ago said that focus on self-love and things will change for you. Who prior to that was complimenting how I looked, complimenting my personality. This is clearly was not someone that was just so disgusted by me as to just all of a sudden drop it all together. And she didn't become that way until I admitted that I liked her romantically. But again, what could I have done to make that any differently? Should I have tracked her IP address and kidnapped her? Well, Envoy, the reason I'm bringing this up is because people's perceptions of relationships and people that are in them are just they're getting more and more absurd. If you had a guy who wasn't, let's say, with a woman, right? And you find him to be ugly, you're more likely to say, "Oh, he just is unattractive," versus, "Oh, he I think he's slightly attractive, so he must be homosexual, or there must be some other hidden reason for why this is happening." And you're not doing that necessarily out of a place just being a complete and utter douchebag, even though it is impractical because for me to assume someone is gay, I need to see them actually do something of that merit, such as making out with some of the same gender, holding some of the same gender. You get the point. Um, but because we live in this world where we can't just accept the fact that there are things we don't know about people, that we don't know what all someone has been through. We go and we just start assuming nonsense such as that this person is you know is fruity or whatever because they're doing something that we ourselves wouldn't do if we're conditioned to not do it. Maybe that person would have liked to have had a wife or been married or any of the other stuff, but no one around him gave him the time of day or the compromise to do it with him. Like I said about VVS, you really believe that he just came in here with his little Kobe avatar and decided one day I just hate all women, or I just think they all have the privilege over males. No, that was a scenario where he probably went into it optimistically and thought his chances were pretty good. And then, like a lot of other ones of us, got tired of the same scenario over and over again, and naturally became resentful of this unfortunate fact. But it's I do find it kind of funny that they've people have tried to translate this into the platonic interactions just because there's way less material about me just talking about quote unquote friendships I've had, that even if I thought they ended badly, still lasted way longer than any of the romantic stuff. I mean, I told you guys in the origins of an introvert, the guy I talked with from, and I mentioned earlier here, from first grade to like 10th or ninth. And a lot of us couldn't even imagine being with a woman for 8 to 9 years because they get so ticked off and picky about every single thing in a lot of cases. Uh, Envoy says, "I don't want. I just want to have fun. At least that's upfront and honest." Yeah. Rather than leading you on to believe something that was never there in the first place to waste everybody's time. I'm telling you, man, and it's really sad because when I talked about that women should approach the males, I realized that is a scenario that most likely will not happen more than maybe once, if at all, for most of us. But the reason I said that was based off of the fact that in every interaction I had where it became serious and or actually got anywhere, except for twice. It was the result of the woman coming up to me. And I always reason it as, they like what they like, and if they like someone enough, they'll go up to that person. But again, that's still that's a scenario that is not designed to be negative. It's just you're when I state that, I'm going off of the basis of what I've seen. Forget what you've heard. Go by what has been the case, and that's what I've tried to do. So when I go and see these, um, women in person, or even, maybe it's some guy I think will want to go see a movie together, and I don't know this person at all other than from seeing them in the flesh. I'm not going to bother going to try to talk to them and either build a friendship with the guy or some relationship with the woman, because I know that in most instances where I've tried to do that in the past, the person doesn't bite. They don't reciprocate. And again, the reason you haven't heard much about the platonic interactions is because I've been able to accept those much easier because I've always had at least a person that was there to play that role. I think Ken is one of those users where it's like they're writing something and then it doesn't go along with what I'm saying. So I always think they have like the thing muted and they're just here to chat about whatever the general topic is. That's what it appears to be. Oh, and I also mentioned in the prior stream that with the romantic stuff, you had no with the platonic stuff rather, you had a person who told me I should accept that people are not into what I'm into. Um, and one of the people that he told me to accept for who they are, literally, out of the blue, condemned me for who I was. And I've used that as my kind of my example of how just backwards all of this stuff is. He said, "Oh, you shouldn't be upset that people don't know about politics because there are people like you and me who get it, and we gotta balance each other out." And so I agreed. I consented to that at the time, um, just for me to be condemned for not partake. Not even just that thing alone. Just accept them for what is their defining characteristic. Um, and mine's is then condemned by the same people, and I'm supposed to take that sitting down. No, we keep calling them idiots because that's what they are. And I've had to clarify, no one's dumb because they don't know something. They're dumb if they are given the opportunity to learn something, um, and continue to refuse to learn it. Take for example, if I wanted to teach any of them about, let's say, World War II, um, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to watch this 3-hour documentary." I say, "All right, you know what? Forget that." And I write down notes, and I start reading out rather the text of the notes. This really summarized version of the documentary. It takes probably an hour to read all of it to them, maybe 30 minutes. They say, "Oh, I don't want to read that." I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll make a video where it's an abridged World War II. So little cartoon drawings, whole war is over in like 10 minutes. Oh, no, I don't want to watch that. So then what else am I supposed to do other than throw my hands up in the air and say, all right, screw you, moron? But again, scenarios like this are constant and repeatedly happening in these interactions I have with this group, where it feels like all you do is try to meet the demands of the person, just for them to just keep moving the goalpost and telling you, oh no, do this, no, no, I don't want to do this. I mean, with some of these people, when it comes to, let's say, the desire to want them to learn something, I could give them a book and that thing could flip its own pages and read its own text, and they would still. But I'm the bad guy for going out of my way to appease that person, to try to make it work. I even had one of them justify it. Oh well, you're the one that mainly wants it to happen, so of course you'd be the one that mainly compromises. Like, yeah, but dude, you're not accepting any of the compromises. You're just sitting there and adding something else. If you say I don't want to get with you unless you make red meat, and I want to make red meat, and then you say, oh no, learn how to brew milk, and I learn how to brew milk, and then you say, oh no, I want you to uh, make a some other nonsense. It just keeps going and going and going. But you gotta understand what it is. It's probably what Envoy's ex-wife told him prior to seizing the mansion and all the other things except for the limousine or the Lamborghini or whatever. I wonder what VVS was saying wow about. Cell phones and the computer. Yeah. No, I understand that. I know that people like to dump each other off for stuff online. And in some cases, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like if you're a person who people around you um, treat you like crap, and then someone online thinks you're like the holy grail of whatever, then there you go. You can have an interaction with someone and actually get them to you know give you the time of day. Maybe something you couldn't get in your own day to day life. So look, in certain cases, the internet and interactions can be decent. What I hate about a lot of this online stuff, and just I guess when people blame it on that, is if it's really the main thing. I just think it's people's just their how they are now. But if the internet stuff is really the main thing that is, I don't know if this thing is working or not. Somebody called me and then it knocked me out of the stream, and then so weird. The internet's decent when the woman actually wants to do something and make effort, but with all those options, it's been very fickle. Yeah, I can see that. But what you have to understand, VVS, is that no matter how fickle it is, you're still going to get blamed for it. Like, I want you to picture this scenario. Let's say I'm a woman and, VVS or Envoy is the guy that's with me, and they say, hey, let's go see a movie. And I go, well, maybe if you wore something that I liked a little bit more. And so then, I just specify for you what I like, and then you go and you put it on, you pick me up. And then, we're going to movies. Like, oh, well, maybe if you give me something to eat first, and then you go and you give me something to eat. Oh, well, maybe if, you get me some dessert before that, and then you get the dessert. Oh, maybe if you buy me a jacket before that. Oh, but see, but when I mentioned that, and just this continuing need for just a thing after another thing after another thing, um, it it was supposed to be in line with the goalpost thing. So, for example, I mentioned to you the woman from last year I spoke with for 3 months. Um, the thing with her pissed me off so much because it felt like almost as if I was either being messed with month after month, like someone pretend to like you and they actually like you, or they were just an idiot. I mean, we're talking about someone who said, "I like how you look, I like your personality." That pretty much should be it. Obviously, there's whether you connect or resonate with each other is another thing, but I thought that was the case. So this is followed by complaints about location, complaints about religion, complaints about culture. Person who's never met me knows my cult, whatever. Um, the bottom line is that you had someone who basically said these two things that a lot of people wish they could have at the same time are in this person, and their decision when they get those two things at last is not to celebrate it. It is to put it underneath all of these demands and desires, and just it gets to a point where you have to almost walk on water for a lot of these people. I'm not even just talking about romantic things. I had a person who gave me a speech last week about how bad I looked, how bad my personality was, and it really disgusted me because the same individual had beforehand only had one thing they consistently complained about with me. It was one thing that I didn't think was a big deal, but it was always that one thing. And he proceeds to list all of this other stuff, um, to the point where I just said to myself, it's all the same with you guys. You sit someone down or you try to write some message to them on YouTube, and you think that you think for a brief moment that person's trying to understand you, and they might be trying to just offer a different perspective. It's more and more goalposting. It's more and more problems they can see in you, as someone who's not living your life than you can see in yourself. Someone that's not with you most of the time now has this analysis of everything that's going on. And this has been the problem with both the women and with the people who analyze those interactions. A group of people who does not, a few of them have tried to, like the one I just mentioned with 3 months, have tried to actually speak to me and get to know me. But if the rest of them don't try the same thing, why would I suddenly be convinced, or why would it make any sense to argue that they have now seen that I'm not working on myself, or any of these other worthless platitudes that, when actually put to task against the actions of others, don't make any sense. You could work on yourself until you're blue in the face, but if someone will not even so much as have a single dialogue with you to get to know what happened or if anything's going on at all, what's the point? Yeah, some sort of sick game, VVS. It is the never-ending cycle, and I guess what bothers me is that when I mentioned being negative earlier, the main thing that has bothered me when it comes to interactions is just the idea that forever it will be this thing of me trying to specify my belief that not all people are the same, because I've personally seen it in my own life, and having those that don't get it, the desire to not want to talk to that many people platonically, the desire to, just get one partner and do something with them that's on a level of trying to stay with that person. They will continue to play this game of not only not understanding, but also not trying to understand, and it's going to keep getting to a point where they wonder why they're getting cut off as they're reinforcing why I cut them off. This type of thinking really ruins the self-esteem. Somebody else is the main issue, but you take all the blame. Yeah, if you're willing to work with them and they don't work with you, I don't get how that's the problem. If this were a working environment, no one would ever say that. No one would tell you that, oh, you worked on this project, but I didn't do my part, so it's your fault. It feels completely, Ken, if that is the mentality you choose to have about women, then let that be your mentality. I'm not here to correct or deny it. But as I've said before, once my mind is made, it's made. So there's really no point in leaving that comment for any reason whatsoever. So it's just another attempt at pushing one's agenda on someone else. Two halves of the same coin, basically. Where did VVS go? Oh, there he is. Uh, keep narrative calling someone. Yeah, well, look, VVS. My problem with them is the fact that they're trying to, like, no one's ever been successful in getting a person to change their mind, at least from what I've seen, by disparaging them. So if they say, hey, you know what, I get that you've been upset by the way women have treated you, but you gotta understand, man, if you do this one thing, I think this will really work, because when I did it, it worked. Or, you know, you have to look at things positively about them because they don't like this, yada yada yada. Um, I can at least think to myself that person's trying to maybe not be a complete, prick when it comes to this. But we're talking about a group of males who are saying, no, there's something wrong with you, and here's insult A, B, C, and D. Now change that. No, it doesn't work that way. And it especially is disturbing when you think about the fact that you're talking to people who, if this were any other avenue of life, you wouldn't think there was something wrong with them. Picture this. All I have is political stuff, reviews. A couple of times you get another guy to come on here and speak about whatever movie or topic is in the news. No one would ever come on here and say, anything about you have a mental deficit and this is why you can't get with a woman. No one would allege that. Felt magic tricks and superpowers, basically. Yeah, but you get my point. No one would ever go up to someone um, in any atmosphere of their life other than this one, and speak with such confidence about this person having some problem with them. and they never ask themselves, well, if this person has such trouble with this one thing, maybe, and is confident in other avenues of his life, which is the case. I personally believe with myself. Maybe this person doesn't have some issue. Maybe it's the people he's been around. Maybe it's those who have also played the 50-50 role in these interactions, either by, doing goalposts or not giving the time of day. Loads and loads of reasons for why it could happen. But maybe we've misjudged this individual. No, you don't get that. There is no character arc for them, but they want a character arc for you. They want you to develop and grow and understand that, the way you're acting is so horrible, but then they can't understand the same thing about themselves. Yeah, but it's not just women though. I mentioned this before in the Saturday stream. It's males and females that don't get it, but feel the need to preach to that person about how awful and terrible they are. Um, and I've ultimately just quit trying to tell them anything because they're just there to get their own voice heard. Find me one thread on here with putting down each other for not getting a man. Hashtag never. No, they have unity on that. They understand each other when it comes to this. I already told you, a lot of them can get one but not keep one. Well, I think the marriage rate is at its decrease. We've been over that before. Bottom line is, I just think that people have such wasted potential. Um, like a lot of these guys that could play the role of being sympathetic to the plight of other males when it comes to this one issue have reduced themselves to being hyper masculine, nasty comment writing degenerates. Uh, and a lot of women who, I think I've seen personally have talent in things, I oftentimes scratch my head when it comes to their, just the way they push back against any kind of possible romantic thing whatsoever. So it's all just been a really bad circle jerk that's really disenfranchised. And I want you to understand, BBS, that when I talk about these groups, I don't enjoy speaking about the stupidity of women or the over aggressiveness of males that are on here. But if they're gonna keep these games up, I don't see a need to not complain about them.